Border Force officials have been sent to Egypt to assist 200 British nationals who are trying to leave Gaza.
Meanwhile, EU leaders have called for pauses so people can leave and aid can enter the Strip.
The Education Secretary Gillian Keegan joins us now from Westminster. Gillian Keegan, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We heard earlier on from one of my reporters just this morning that breaking news that the bombing hasn't stopped, and actually Israel are claiming that they have targeted Hamas military sites, and also claiming that they have managed to kill one of the commanders they say was partly responsible for the events of October the 7th. Do you know any more about this, and can you tell us any more?
No, I don't know any more about it. I mean, obviously, it's a live situation that's happening all the time. The reason we've sent the Border Force there is just to be prepared so that as we get that pause, if we get that pause, we can immediately operationalise getting more aid to the right people in Gaza and get British nationals out as quickly as possible. So, as you say, the situation's moving around all the time. We're calling for a pause, as are many others. So we're hoping that that is something that there's a lot of intense diplomatic talks. But at this point, we are there ready with aid on the border and also with Border Force to help our nationals.
How do we differentiate from what a pause is and a ceasefire? Why don't we just call for a ceasefire, because that's effectively what it is, and that would enable the bombing to stop, civilian deaths to stop, and we hope hostages to be released. So why don't we just call for a ceasefire rather than a pause?
So what we have to be very clear is we support Israel and Israel's right to defend itself after the horrific attacks in Israel by a terrorist organisation, Hamas. And that decision, therefore, is for Israel to decide how it defends itself and what it does within international law, of course. So the reason we don't say call for a ceasefire is because it's Israel's decision and Israel's right to defend itself. Obviously, asking for a pause for humanitarian aid is an operational thing. It's something to ensure that we can get the aid through to those people who need it. There's heartbreaking scenes in Gaza. We've all seen them. We're trying to get as much aid as we can to the right people so that we can support the Palestinian people. But we don't want to cross that line of saying to Israel that they have anything but the right to defend themselves. They do have the right to defend themselves after the horrific attacks.
You talk about crossing the line. Some people will say that they have crossed the line in terms of humanitarian law. I mean, today the UN's World Food Programme are saying that they may well be using starvation as a weapon. That sounds like breaking humanitarian law and sounds very much like a war crime.
We have to be very clear on this. It's Hamas who have created this situation. It's Hamas who are embedding themselves within the civilian population in Palestine. It's Hamas who are a terrorist organisation. And we have to be very clear about this. Obviously, we are urging for a pause because we're very, very concerned by the situation in Gaza and the scenes that we're seeing from there. But in terms of what we're doing, we're trying to get the aid in, we're trying to get the people out, but we support fully Israel's right to defend herself.
You mentioned the Border Force officials that have been sent to assist the British nationals. I could only imagine that must be a huge challenge because you've called for a pause, or EU's called for pauses to get that aid in and to get them out. But there's no guarantee, is there, that Hamas will observe that? So it must be an extraordinary thing to try and pull off.
It is, and it's operationally very difficult, and that's why we've sent, plane load of aid. It's why we've sent Border Force. It's why we've got people there. Our International Development Secretary has been working with a lot of people in the region to make sure that we're prepared to be able to get this aid to the right place. But yes, we are reliant on there being a pause and the pause being observed. And as I say, there's intense diplomatic efforts, and the Prime Minister's been leading those with the Foreign Secretary.
I mean, you say that Israel has a right to defend itself, and I think you're absolutely right, and that is within, actually, international law. But I think a lot of people will look at the images, and here we are in a war. It's probably the first time in our lifetimes that we can see what's going on social media. And yes, it takes some extent to verify that all these pictures, but a lot of them will be true. And a lot of people will look at this and go, it looks atrocious. A lot of people are giving all sorts of descriptions to it. And recently, Turkish President Erdogan, on Friday, in fact, called it a genocide. He said it amounted to genocide. Those are very strong words. What's your response to that?
Well, my response will be exactly the same. You've got to be very clear in these situations. I mean, the pictures are absolutely heartbreaking, coming from Israel a few weeks ago and from Gaza. I mean, they really are heartbreaking, and, you know, innocent civilians have been caught up in this. But we have to be very clear about why we're in this situation. Hamas have created this situation, and Hamas are now embedding themselves in the Palestinian
about the actions
population.
Right now. And it's okay, and absolutely, and I think we'd all agree, and we all agree that yes, the Hamas.
But we need to be very clear on it. I'm not sure everybody is as clear as they need to be.
We're dealing with the present as well. What is happening now? We've got to look at what's happening now. And we all have a duty to make sure humanitarian law is abided by. Now, if it's not a genocide right now, what would a genocide look like then? Because these are people of a group of a certain ethnicity who are being asked to move from their land, who are being killed, whether that's part of warfare or not, but they are being killed. It looks to a lot of people like a genocide. It certainly looks to Turkish President Erdogan. What would a genocide look like if it's not this?
Hamas are using civilians as human shields, and that is absolutely unacceptable, and that is the reason that these people are in this awful situation. They're embedding themselves amongst the civilian population. I mean, we don't know exactly where they are, but we hear of reports that they're in hospitals, they're in other places. Hamas are a terrorist organisation. They've carried out an atrocity in Israel, and Hamas are now continuing to carry out atrocities by the way they're using the innocent Palestinian population in Gaza. We must be very clear that Hamas need to stop what they're doing.
Now, you are Education Secretary. Thank you very much for answering the questions. As you appreciate, we need to speak to you about the news of the day that's worldwide. But I want to talk to you about this new website that you're backing for parents to be able to look up the eligibility or their eligibility to get additional childcare. On the face of it, it looks incredibly helpful for those parents. But what good is knowing you're eligible if you haven't got the places at the nursery schools, or indeed, crucially, the staff to look after those children? Because the industry says there's just not enough recruitment and there are not enough places, and parents will be disappointed.
Well, that's my job, to make sure parents are not disappointed. So alongside the website announcement, we're also announcing £100 million for capital funding, so we can work to expand existing nursery places, whether that's take another floor, an extension, etc. We're also, we've got a fund of £259 million, which we're announcing today, which is for the rollout of the wraparound care. So as well as childcare, 30 hours free childcare from the day your child is 9 months up until your child starts school, as well as that to support working parents. That will support them with the cost of childcare, but also to create more flexibility. So usually women have the chance to continue with their career. We're also rolling out wraparound care from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. all across the country. So that is also part of getting ready to roll that out. So yes, I need to recruit a lot more staff. We've got new apprenticeships. We've got new qualifications. We're also, we've got an experience route for those that are there at the moment. So we're working on a number of things. We've also increased the rates so that we can pay fairly and make sure that there's career progression. There's great career progression in this sector, but we need to make that clearer to people on the way in, where they can get to. So there's a lot of work going on. This will be rolled out. The next stage in terms of another 15 hours free childcare will be there in April, then there'll be more in September 24, and then it will all be rolled out by September 2025, the full entitlement. So we've got a lot to do in that time.
OK. Gillian, we'll have to leave it there. Gillian Keegan, thanks very much for joining us, Education.
Very much indeed.
Thank you.